Yeah, and we really need a clean slate kind of help. And that's the reason I was actually half jokingly talking about the psychedelic. Really look at it through a new lens. And that's again what small players can do much better than big players.
This episode is proudly brought to you by Mapper Forward's workshop. It's time to become a coffee consultant. Learn how to diversify your revenue streams and create freedom from your day job while saying goodbye to that alarm clock forever by becoming a consultant within the coffee industry or directly to consumers who have shifted towards home brewing and home roasting. Protect your income from challenging times in the coffee value chain by taking this course today. Go to mapperforward.coffee/workshops or click the link in the show notes for details. Welcome to the Daily Coffee Pro by Map It Forward, friends. I'm your host, Lee Safar, and this is unfortunately the last episode in a 5-part series with Ted Fischer. Ted, this has been an outstanding conversation. Thank you so much. This has been really fun. We've got to joust a little bit through our series. And in this series, we've been talking about creating value and how it's created across the specialty coffee market. We've talked about quality. We've talked about power dynamics. We've talked about comparing the different ways that, like, different kinds of the same thing. We've talked about the golden espresso machine and what that really means for our industry. Today, we're going to talk about what comes next from all of this. Where I want to start the conversation is at this term carpet bombing, which is a business strategy that I recently got told about. Have you ever heard of this?
I had not.
Okay. Carpet bombing is a term that's being used for the next way of doing business in our industry for people or companies that have extremely deep pockets. So it's a predatory business model where they come into a new market. And it's not new, but I've never heard it described as carpet bombing. They come in, they open hundreds of strategically positioned businesses right next door to businesses that do the same thing, and they charge next to nothing. And David Yan talked about this on the podcast recently when we were talking about China and the Asian market. So they come in to a brand new market, they destroy the local market, and they do that by charging next to nothing for as long as is necessary to destroy everyone. And then what happens is when they know they're safe, they then increase the prices overnight because where else are you going to buy your coffee? So what happens and why they do this is because our environment or the ecosystems that we're all operating in right now make it perfect for big business to do this, right? What does this say about what comes next for our industry?
Wow. Well, there's an obvious sort of disheartening story that could result from that. And I mean, we've seen it in other sectors, right?
Right.
Amazon puts booksellers out of business. Walmart put hardware stores out of business. So we've seen this over and over again. And then you wind up with these big players that have a kind of monopoly that we haven't traditionally defined as monopoly. So it's hard for regulators to go after them. And they wind up with an enormous amount of power to set the market prices paid to producers and prices charged to consumers. So that aspect of it is really disheartening. I think there's also, again, me playing my role of optimist
I love
here.
it.
I think there's also maybe a possibility there, and something that you had suggested in our conversation in the last episode. Small producers can be a little bit more, small cafes and small roasters can be a little bit more agile.
Mm.
And if you think about the market being broken up into different sectors, there's a low cost chain blanketing New York City right now but they're based on just like everybody who's coming by and getting a cup of coffee to drink on their way to work. So what can those kind of places not add for the third space, for the office that are not involved, looking for ways in which they can add value that's tied to them being small.
Right.
Maybe that's a little bit of an opportunity. Although one thing that I had meant to mention when we were talking about different sizes of cafes and stuff and people using them as third spaces, that's very economically segregated as well. It's a certain economic class of people who can go hang out in the coffee shop on a Tuesday morning for a couple of hours, right?
Right. And when we look at that, I want to ask you about that idea of agility, right? How does a company, whatever size they are, what increases their ability to be more agile? Is it that they can, leaning on what you were just saying, do they make it more accessible to people, to people who wouldn't normally have access to it? What are the things that make a business more agile?
That's a great question. And I'm sure that lots of business books have been written on exactly this topic. And so I hesitate a little bit to wade into this world. But building off of what you said earlier, so I think size of operation is negatively correlated with agility. And big corporations try and get around this sometimes. Google sets up their dark lab or whatever they call it at a different site with a different ethos. And so they try and create startup culture within a big operation, but that's only moderately successful. So I think size is a part of it, but also being willing to think something that you have championed in various times in the podcast, being willing to think outside of the box, being willing not to play the game that somebody else is setting the rules to. But if you see a way to play a different game, play that game. Yeah, you got to pull the consumers along, right? Or it's not going to work. But if you can figure out a game that consumers would buy into, don't feel constrained that way. It's often our own mental constraints that stop that kind of stuff. Oh, that's just the way the market is. But yeah, maybe think outside of the box. You don't have to go on an ayahuasca retreat and sort of think, fiction. But that would be one way.
Word. I'm all for that fuckery. Do it, folks. But at the same time, while you're doing it and while you're going on your voyage and while you're going on that fun experience, ask for some information on how we fix this shit, because we need some help.
Yeah, and we really need a clean slate kind of help. And that's the reason I was actually half jokingly talking about the psychedelic. Really look at it through a new lens. And that's, again, what small players can do much better than big players.
Yeah. Agility, really, I hadn't thought about it before this conversation, which is why I'm such a big fan of these kinds of conversations. It pushes you to corners of your mind that you haven't explored ideas before. And I'd never really thought about the agility as a kind of a hopeful aspect of what drives our industry forward. One of the champions of agility, I think, is perhaps relationships.
Like it. When can you be your most vulnerable is when you're even in our personal lives, when you're enmeshed in strong relationships, right? When can you be most venturesome? When can you... Wow, I had not thought of that aspect of it either. I like that.
Well, and what I am privy to is people who listen to this podcast and then contact me, and as you know, they listen to me every day. From their perspective, they know me and they tell me, Lee, we have to sell our coffee farm, or we have to sell our cafe, and we don't know anybody that might be open to buying this. We just don't have what it takes. We're exhausted. We just need to sell it. Can you find someone? Do you know someone? And these are the kinds of and whether I know somebody or not, we can at least bond over the fact that they're feeling very vulnerable at this time and they don't know what to do. It's a deep honor for me that they would welcome me into that vulnerability. But we could help find solutions somehow for those kinds of things.
And that vulnerability is opening up possibility there and
Yeah.
made possible by relationships.
100%.
I like that angle a lot.
When we look at the idea of what comes next and we look at this moment that we're in, which I think you and I are aligned on the perspective that we know that there's something coming. And, kudos to the folks who think that we're delusional. Good for you. I'm sure you're much more informed than we are. But Ted and I we're aligned on this. That there's the system isn't going to function the way it's been functioning the last 40, 50 years for much longer. And if it does, it means that when this thing that comes, it's going to be an even more colossal clusterfuck. So what are we, in your mind as an anthropologist, what happens from now until the time that happens? And then what comes next?
From now until when that happens, I think we anthropologists are very good at explaining the past, and right. Social scientists, we have a poor record of predicting the future. Although I would say, if we could this might seem like a leap, but if we could leap to thinking about civilizational collapses, they generally happen at apexes. We often think about it as like a decline, right? And everybody sees it coming. No, it's when nobody sees it coming and we're just going ahead full speed with the way things are. And then the crash is worse. And I think that is equivalent. We've got pressure. We've got serious pressure from both sides of the supply chain, or all angles if we do it multidimensionally. And something's going to have to give. And the result is going to, it's a scary time in my mind, because we don't know what's coming next. And so we don't have a roadmap for what's coming next. That presents a lot of opportunity, but that opportunity can go either way. I could see a massive consolidation coming in the wake of a crash. You see private equity and big players buying up farms strategically and controlling that end of the supply chain, doing the carpet bombing on cafes. It would be ripe for people with deep pockets to come in and really consolidate the industry. It also maybe could provide an opportunity for, if we can rethink it in a way, provide an opportunity to make it a more equitable supply chain, which is really, that's not just about justice. And I believe it is a justice issue, and I'm happy arguing it on those grounds. It's a sustainability issue, however. And so if we see this as investment in long-term sustainability, I think that just to mention a couple of things, I've been thinking about this a lot lately too, what comes next. And there are some models out, and some innovative models out there, right? There's like farmer-owned roasters and cafes. There's a group here in the Pachamama that's trying to do a cooperative.
Paso in Europe. Yep.
So there are some neat things that are going along those routes. And I would like to think that there could be more of that after a crisis. But the real trick would be to avoid the crisis, right? It's to recognize that the crisis is coming, and let's start modifying the system now. The most powerful ideas I've heard are all very backward looking, and I don't think, and this is again from a view of producers, of setting minimum prices and quotas and setting up some sort of international framework. And I just don't think I don't think that that's viable anymore either. And that is what set up these super powerful national federations like the FNC in Colombia and ANACAFE in Guatemala. They were all the gatekeepers to that. So yeah, the countries were getting more, sort of guaranteed amount per pound on the beans. But how was that being distributed within those countries? It was not equitable.
No, and it's rife for corruption. I'm not saying that those organizations are corrupt. Please don't come and shoot me. What I'm saying is it creates the opportunity for those kinds of things. Bro, I live in the Middle East. I know what I'm talking about.
Absolutely. And so in this new world in which we're sort of tentatively envisioning, we've got to give power to producers. And so we've got to figure out how to give some power to producers. And that can't be just a charity premium for fair trade or whatever, because that's fickle. We've got to actually let them be. We've been talking a lot about relationships. A relationship is built on equal standing. If there's not equal standing, then you can't really have a relationship. And that means recognizing producers in a particular kind of way.
I got to ask you, when stuff like this happens historically, does it lead to anarchy? Does it lead to instability or stability? Do people feel defeated and just, put their swords down and hand over all their power to, the almighty powers that be? Is it a defeatist attitude, or is it like, I'm going to fuck shit up and I'm going to destroy? What usually happens?
I'm not sure I can really answer that, but I think we can see both of those sentiments, not only in coffee, but speaking more broadly in politics these days. I think a lot of supporters of the new wave of authoritarian right-wing leaders are I think that they're often not as stupid as many pundits think that they are. I think that they think the system is completely broken and that the best way would be to blow it up and to start over. And so then a vote for a crazy person can be rational in the sense of, I just want to explode the system. Yeah.
Well, and I think I hear that from a lot of responsible business owners now, is what they say to me. These are people who lived within their means. They are agile. They will survive this. But it's being drawn out. And they know, so it's already started. We can see what's happening in Australia. It's a bloodbath. So the ones that are going to survive, they need it to just happen already. It's happening all over the world. And that's what they're saying. Like, can the system just crash already so that the desaturation can happen and then consumers can start helping the businesses that are going to be left survive before the carpet bombing happens?
I think that is brilliant. Absolutely. And it does for the cafe owners. And again, thinking further down the supply chain, what inhibits, I think there's a lot of interest of small roasters and small cafes to establish direct relationships with producers, often by law, and if not by law, just by sort of almost inescapable custom. You have to go through so many middle people along the way. You have to have an importer to clear customs and do all of that stuff. You have to have an exporter in the country of origin. You've got all of these gatekeepers that are stopping a lot of the innovation. So to your point, blowing that system up would allow for more innovation.
I think that's a wonderfully hopeful place to end this series. On hopeful anarchy.
I love it.
Only you and I could arrive at an end point that was hopeful anarchy. And I don't consider myself an anarchist at all, but I don't know how we got there. And I'm happy for us to end there. Ted, this has been a true delight to have this conversation with you. Thank you for coming on the podcast for the first time. I hope it's the first time of many. Open invitation to come back.
Thank you so much. This has been one of the best conversations. I feel like we could go on for hours.
We really could. We really could. So thank you.
And well, I have to say back to you then, peace, love, and peanut butter.
Peace, love, and peanut butter. So friends, hit the show notes for how to get access to Ted on LinkedIn, on social media, and the name of your book. Please give it another plug before we go.
Making Better Coffee.
And where can people buy it? Is it available on Amazon yet?
Anywhere and everywhere. Yes.
Fantastic.
Amazon. And given our conversation, I hate to push people to Amazon.
No, go for it. Give us one last peace, love, and peanut butter, Ted.
Peace, love, and peanut butter.
Have an amazing rest of your day, everyone. Bye. That was truly, truly a great series. I really hope you enjoyed this episode, friends. Please don't forget to show us some love by subscribing, liking, commenting, and most of all, sharing this podcast with your friends. Check the show notes for links, including our sponsors and our Patreon. And stay tuned for more great conversations on the Daily Coffee Pro by Map It Forward.